the University of the Philippines Visayas Regional Research Center. This will be the home of the Philippine Genome Center Visayas. The Regional Research Center is one of the newest facilities here in UPV, aimed at spearheading cutting-edge research, not only in the Western Visayas region, but across the Philippines as well. Being one of the leading research institutions here at UPV, the Philippine Genome Center will serve as the omics arm of the Regional Research Center. Now, to start things off, let's go inside to take a look at the newest home of the Philippine Genome Center. Come on in. So this is the lobby of the Philippine Genome Center, and PGC are actually the RRC, and PGC is actually located on the second floor. So come on in. Tara. So welcome to the laboratories of the Philippine Genome Center Visayas. So the Philippine Genome Center Visayas is a research, training, and service facility for omics technologies to capacitate the nation in pursuing cutting-edge research as an arm of the Philippine Genome Center here in the region. This Philippine Genome Center Visayas wouldn't have been realized without the support, especially of the Department of Science and Technology. So from the bottom of our hearts, the University of the Philippines Visayas is very thankful also for the continuous support that DOST has provided. So come on, let's start the tour. Pasok kayo. Huwag mahiya. So, welcome to the sample preparation room of PGC Visayas. This is where we initially receive our samples, we store them, and this is also where we process them for other downstream research needs. Let me show you some of the equipment we have here so that you could be familiar with our services here at the sample preparation room. So let me show you some of the equipment we have here at the sample preparation room. First is what we use sometimes to preserve our samples. So we have our liquid nitrogen generator. So liquid nitrogen is a bit very important when we want to preserve, for example, the RNA in our samples, or also some other very sensitive compounds that we want to analyze. Aside from our liquid nitrogen generator, we have your standard ice maker, mainly to keep our samples so that if we have to work on ice, keeps it at lower temperature. So it's just a convenient way to produce ice. Over here, we have one of our research assistants, si Danica. I think Danica right now is preparing some reagents for extraction. So, salamat Danica. And then we have here some of our biosafety cabinet and chemical fume hoods. So when we have to deal with bacteria or other pathogenic bacteria, we have to use our biosafety cabinet. So this is similar to the ones they use at the COVID-19 laboratories as well. And then when we have to do decontamination and also prepare some of our glasswares, we just use our ovens and especially our autoclaves as well, just to make sure that whatever waste we generate at the Philippine Genome Center is appropriately decontaminated so that we don't introduce any other pathogens into the environment. Then, as part of the preparation process, sometimes we have to break down the cells or the bacteria that we work with. So we have different types of sonicators. Here we have our bath-type sonicator, which we use to process larger samples. And then we also have our probe-type ultrasonicator, mainly used to break down smaller cell suspensions as well. Then we also have our shaker incubators, mainly used when we want to culture some bacteria, for example, when we do bacterial transformations and the like. And finally, just to store our samples, we have both ultra-low freezers at -80 degrees Celsius and also our -20 degree freezer to store some of our reagents and also samples as well. So basically, that's it for our sample preparation room. Let's move on to our extraction room. So, okay pa kayo? Let's proceed to the next room here at PGC Visayas, which is our nucleic acid extraction room. Pasok. So here at our DNA or nucleic acid extraction room, we have several equipment that will ensure that when we extract our DNA or RNA, we avoid any cross-contamination. So one of the equipment that we use is our laminar flow hood. We work under this bench if we really want to ensure that all the DNA or RNA that we are extracting is free from any other contaminants. And we also use a series of centrifuges, mainly to concentrate whatever material we're working on. We have our microcentrifuge, and we also have a larger centrifuge, which we use for larger volumes of liquid. So it can handle spinning down up to a liter of our liquid volumes when we process some samples. Aside from our centrifuges, we also have another incubator. Sometimes when we do extractions, we have to incubate it for some time, especially when we're working with some enzymes to break down the cellular components of a particular material. Now, let's move forward. Sometimes we do things manually, and one of the examples of manual extraction is what Miss Claire is doing over here at the moment. Claire is one of our researchers at the Philippine Genome Center as well, and right now she's doing manual extraction of some samples using magnetic beads. Okay. Thanks, Claire. Now, sometimes to make things easier, it's always better to automate things. So we also have what we would like to is our automated extraction machine. So this allows us to extract either DNA or RNA in an automated fashion without having to really do it or pipette manually. So when we deal with larger samples, we turn to our automated extraction machine. Now, aside from our extraction machine, we also have to check the quality of the DNA or RNA extracts that we have. And with that, we do either we have to do some forms of electrophoresis. This one we basically use for proteins, but the one we use or test for nucleic acids would be our agarose gel electrophoresis systems. So after running our gel electrophoresis, we also document it in our gel documentation system, which is over there at the corner. So with that, this is basically our gel extraction or our DNA extraction room here at PGC Visayas. So let's move on to our last room where most of the data gathering actually happens. So tara! So let's have a look at our last room here, which is our PCR room at the Philippine Genome Center Visayas. So in this room, this is where we collect most of the data that we send for analysis or do analysis on. Aside from our PCR machines, we also have a variety of other equipment here to do quality assurance if we need to send samples to the Philippine Genome Center in Diliman. So one of the machines we use here at the PCR room is actually our flow cytometer. It's used for microbiological studies, so it allows us to study the different particle sizes or gives us an idea of the different sizes of cells when we run it through the machine as well. So aside from our flow cytometer, what we use for quality assurance and for quantification of nucleic acids, we have our qubit fluorometer here. And we also have our Agilent bioanalyzer. This is what we use to do quality checks. If we want to send samples for what we call this next generation sequencing to the Philippine Genome Center in Diliman, we run our samples first, our DNA or RNA samples, through our bioanalyzer to make sure that we have the good enough quality for them to do their next generation sequencing. We also have our PCR machine here. Right now, there's only one PCR machine stationed at this particular lab. Some of our PCR machines are stationed in some of the other laboratories at the University of the Philippines, Visayas, and our real-time PCR machine is actually doing some work at the Western Visayas Medical Center in Iloilo City at the moment. It's being used for their COVID-19 testing efforts actually. So aside from that, we also have our spectrophotometer here, which we mainly use also for quantifying our nucleic acids. One of our researchers is Marge, and she's quantifying or also preparing some quality checks for the samples that we're about to send to the Philippine Genome Center in Diliman. So Marge, okay na ba yung samples? Okay. Okay, sige. Maraming salamat. So, that's basically it for our tour here. And to get a better idea of the services that we offer, you could take a look at this. So that ends our tour of the laboratories and equipment we have here at the Philippine Genome Center Visayas. But more than our facilities and equipment, what we take most pride in is our staff here at PGC Visayas. So I'd like to introduce you to Team PGC Visayas. These are the people who will be helping you in the coming years when we do our omics research together for the Philippines and for the world. So as always, PGC Visayas, para sa Pilipino, at para sa bayan.